She hurt you and you said nothing. No anger, no shouting, no desperate explanations, just silence. And in a world where everyone reacts, where everyone tries to prove a point, defend their ego, or win the last word, you chose something different. You chose control. Do you understand how rare that is? Most people, when they feel pain, they expose it, they chase, they beg, they try to fix what's already broken, they hand over their dignity just to feel seen again. But if you didn't. You felt everything, the betrayal, the confusion, the sleepless nights, but you didn't let it turn you into someone weak. You didn't let it make you loud. You didn't let it make you desperate. You stayed silent, and that silence, that's what's haunting her, because silence is power. Silence creates question. Silence forces reflection. When you don't react, people are left alone with their own actions. There's no distraction. No argument to hide behind, no chaos to escape into, just truth. And now she's sitting there replaying everything. Why didn't he fight back? Why didn't he chase me? Why didn't he break? Because deep down, she expected you to. She expected you to prove that you needed her, that your world revolved around her, that without her, you would fall apart. But you didn't. You walked away with your dignity intact. And now that's the part she can't forget. Not the memories, not the moments, but the fact that you didn't lose yourself. Because when a man stays silent in pain, it doesn't mean he didn't care. It means he cared enough about himself not to beg for what should have been given freely. And that realization, it hits harder than any argument ever could. Now she wonders if she lost someone real, someone rare. Someone who didn't play games, who didn't chase validation, who didn't need to prove his worth. You didn't try to convince her to stay. You didn't lower your standards. You didn't trade your self-respect for temporary comfort. And that's what separates you. Because most people react out of emotion, but you responded with discipline. And discipline always leaves a deeper impact. Let me tell you something. People don't forget the ones who begged. They forget them easily, but they never forget the one who walked away in silence. The one who felt everything yet showed nothing. The one who didn't need closure to move forward. That kind of strength, it lingers. It stays in their mind when everything else fades. It shows up in quiet moments. It whispers in their regrets because your silence wasn't weakness. It was a message that said, I know my worth. I won't chase what doesn't choose me. I can feel pain without losing myself. And that kind of energy, it's unforgettable. So don't break your silence now. Don't go back trying to explain yourself. Don't reopen doors you have the strength to close. Let her remember you exactly like this, calm, controlled, unshaken, because the truth is, she didn't lose you when she hurt you. She lost you the moment you chose silence over chaos. And that's something she'll carry for a very long time. Silence is not emptiness. It is not weakness. It is not the absence of feeling. Silence is control in its purest form. When everything inside you is pushing you to react, to speak, to defend yourself, and yet you choose to hold your ground without saying a word. That is power most people will never understand. Anyone can raise their voice. Anyone can send that message, make that call, or try to prove a point in the heat of emotion. That requires no discipline. That is instinct. But to sit with the storm inside you and not let it spill out recklessly, that takes strength. That takes mastery over yourself. Because in moments of pain, your first reaction is rarely your best one. It is driven by ego, by hurt, by the need to be understood. Immediately, you want them to feel what you feel. You want them to know they were wrong. You want closure, validation, or even just a response. But when you act from that place, you give away your power. You hand control of your emotions to someone else. Silence takes that control back. When you don't react, you create space. Space to think clearly. Space to see the situation for what it really is, not what your emotions are telling you it is in that moment. And in that space, you make decisions from strength, not desperation. There is something deeply unsettling about a person who doesn't react the way others expect. It disrupts the pattern. It removes the drama. It forces the other person to sit alone with their actions, without distraction. No argument to hide behind. No words to twist, just the weight of what they've done. And that's where silence becomes powerful. It shifts the focus. Instead of you trying to explain yourself, justify your feelings, or defend your position, the attention turns to them, their choices, their behavior, their role in what happened. And most people are not comfortable sitting in that kind of reflection. They would rather argue than face the truth, but your silence gives them no escape. At the same time, it strengthens you, because every moment you choose not to react impulsively, you are building discipline. You are proving to yourself that your emotions do not control you, that no situation, no person, no moment of pain has the authority to dictate your behavior. That is real power. It means you are not easily shaken. It means you cannot be manipulated into reacting. It means your peace is not dependent on someone else's actions. And over time, that kind of control changes you. You become calmer, sharper, more aware. You stop wasting energy on things that don't deserve your response. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You realize that not everything requires a reaction. Not everything deserves your voice. Sometimes the strongest statement you can make is saying nothing at all, because silence, when chosen with intention, speaks louder than any words ever could. There comes a moment in life where you are forced to choose between holding on to someone else and holding on to yourself, and most people fail that test. They trade their self-respect for temporary attention. They lower their standards just to avoid feeling alone. They beg for love in places where it was never being given freely, but real strength is choosing differently. Self-respect is not loud. It doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, and it doesn't try to convince anyone to stay. It stands firm even when everything inside you wants to run back, to fix things, to hold on a little longer. Because deep down, you know the truth. If someone has to be convinced to value you, they never truly did. Validation feels good, but it's temporary. It's fragile. When you depend on someone else to make you feel worthy, you give them control over your emotions. Their attention becomes your happiness. Their absence becomes your pain. And without realizing it, you slowly lose yourself trying to keep them. That's the trap. Because the more you seek validation, the more you tolerate what you shouldn't. You accept less than you deserve. You ignore red flags. You justify disrespect. All because you're afraid of losing the little attention they give you. But self-respect changes everything. It forces you to see clearly. It reminds you that your value does not decrease just because someone failed to recognize it. It tells you that love, you should never feel like a negotiation, never feel like something you have to earn by sacrificing your dignity. And the hardest part, acting on it, because walking away is painful. Choosing yourself means facing the silence, the absence, the emptiness that follows. It means letting go of what you hoped things could be. It means accepting that not everyone is meant to stay in your life. But in that pain, there is power. Because every time you choose self-respect over validation, you rebuild your identity. You stop defining yourself through someone else's approval. You stop chasing external confirmation of your worth. You begin to understand that your value is sabid. It doesn't rise or fall based on who stays or who leaves. And that realization is freeing. It means you no longer need to prove yourself. You no longer need to over-explain, over-give, or overstay. You don't need to compete for attention or beg for consistency. You simply become unavailable to anything that disrespects your peace. That's when everything shifts. People can feel it. The energy changes. You stop attracting situations where you have to fight for basic respect because you've made a decision within yourself. You would rather walk alone with dignity than stay somewhere you're not valued. And that decision is powerful because it shows that you are not controlled by fear. Not fear of loneliness, not fear of rejection, not fear of losing someone who was never fully there to begin with. It shows that you understand something most people don't. That temporary comfort is never worth permanent self-betrayal. And once you truly understand that, you stop chasing validation and start living with self-respect. Most people move through life expecting predictable reactions. They say something, they expect a response. They hurt you, they expect anger, they pull away, they expect you to chase. It's a pattern repeated so many times that it becomes almost automatic. And because it's so common, it loses its impact. There's nothing memorable about doing what everyone else does, but the moment you break that pattern, everything changes. Unpredictable strength is not about being confusing or playing games. It's about refusing to follow emotional scripts that people are used to. It's about responding with control when chaos is expected. And that contrast creates a psychological impact that is impossible to ignore. When someone hurts you, they are often prepared for a reaction. They expect confrontation, emotional messages, or visible pain. In a strange way, those reactions make things easier for them. It gives them something to respond to, something to justify, something to twist if needed. It keeps the situation alive on their terms. But when you don't react the way they expect, you remove that comfort. Your silence, your calmness, your composure, it creates a gap between what they anticipated and what actually happened. And that gap forces them to think. It disrupts their control over the situation. Suddenly, they're not dealing with your emotions anymore. They're dealing with their own, and most people are not prepared for that because now there are questions with no answers, no argument to replay, no final message to analyze, just an open-ended moment that keeps looping in your mind. They start wondering why you didn't react, what you're thinking, whether you've moved on, whether you even cared. And ironically, that's when they start caring more. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't say. Unpredictable strength shifts attention. It moves the focus away from your pain and places it directly on their actions. Without your reaction to hide behind, they are left alone with the weight of what they did. And that kind of reflection is uncomfortable. It lingers longer than any argument ever could. At the same time, it builds something powerful within you because choosing not to react impulsively requires awareness. It requires you to pause in moments where your emotions are loud and decide that you will not be controlled by them, that you will not give someone the satisfaction of seeing you break in the way they expected. That decision builds inner strength. You begin to realize that your power is not in controlling others, but in controlling yourself. You don't need to win arguments. You don't need to prove points. You don't need to explain your worth to anyone who feels it. Your actions, or lack of them, speak for you. And over time, people start to notice, not because you demand attention, but because your presence carries a different energy. Calm, grounded, and unshaken. You become someone who cannot be easily read, easily provoked, or easily influenced. That kind of presence leaves a mark, because in a world full of predictable reactions, the person who responds with controlled